Peterson has developed a catchphrase of sorts that has resonated and caught on with many of the disenfranchised people who have come to him. Clean your room, bucko. Clean your room.
And now we're going to talk about the catchphrase. We're going to talk about what everyone loves to meme Peterson for. We're going to let TJ take us away.
A simple phrase. The same kids who likely ignored it when it came from their parents are now championing it as great philosophical wisdom now that it comes to them from Peterson. And here is what it means, according to Peterson in an interview with ABC Comedy's Tonightly with Tom Ballard.
If you're going to fix complicated problems, you have to learn how to fix simple problems first. Then you get good at it. I'm not saying that young people don't have things to be concerned about, because life is a concern, right? I mean, life is a fatal disease. It's a concern. You're not on top of it. There's always more challenge than you can take on in some sense. But complaining about the structure of being and attempting to reorganize massive social structures, especially when you don't know the first thing about them, which is generally the case, is just not advisable. And the universities, you know, they teach young kids, young people, 19, 20 years old, that they should be out attempting to rectify massive social organizations. It's like, you wouldn't go and try to fix a cruise ship. You know, things are complicated. You can't set your own room in order. You can't set your own family, your life in order. What the hell makes you think you're ready to take on something like the political system? That's hard. You're gonna mess it up, man, for sure.
It sounds so reasonable, doesn't it? Too bad it's completely wrong. The people throughout history who have made an impact, who have changed the world for better or for worse, have never done so by cleaning their room, but by messing it up. Remember that angry mob I mentioned in my example of harmful chaos? The throngs of people turning over cars, breaking windows, setting fires, and throwing a massive tantrum? Let me ask you this. What are they saying? Are they saying, we are through with order, and now we want nothing but chaos? No, probably not. What they're saying is, we are tired of the order that exists now, and we demand a new order. We demand an order more in line with what we want the world to be.
Now, this is what I find to be a very silly counter-argument or point, because it's taking the quote way out of its intended context. And the thing that's interesting to me is Jordan Peterson kind of puts it very succinct at the very beginning of what he said, at the very beginning of the clip that was shown at the very least, and that is, the purpose of the phrase clean your room boils down to, in order to fix a bigger, more complex problem that is oftentimes out of your control, you must first be able to handle a smaller problem that you can affect. And from this seed, you can grow a large oak tree. The point is that if your goal is to try to change a large-scale political system, if your goal is to try to change something, it's best that you sort yourself out first, so you know where you stand, so you know what you want, so you know what you're good at, before you go on and challenge it. If you can't handle something as simple as cleaning up your room, then you probably should not be trying to clean up a large-scale political system that has existed for probably twice as long as you have been alive. That is the point of saying clean your room. The point is to think critically about who you are in yourself. I think he means it literally sometimes, like literally you should clean your room, organize your thoughts. But metaphorically, it's about getting yourself sorted out and knowing where you stand and why you stand there.
Only these facts are important. 1. Both men were malcontents who opposed the established order of their times. 2. Both men disrupted the established order with their speeches and protests, causing great confusion and pandemonium. They used the power of chaos. 3. They changed the world into something more akin to how they thought it ought to be. And they didn't change the world by making sure their rooms were clean and by being respectful to order. They changed the world by causing havoc, disruption, and chaos. Their rooms were dirty. Dirty rooms.
I would actually argue the complete opposite. TJ says that no man or no person that has changed anything in the large-scale system has done so by cleaning their room. I would say wrong. I would say that's the only way they've changed something. They figured out what they wanted. They figured out what was their purpose in life, what was their role, and they sought out to complete it. Now, I don't believe that cleaning your room means you're going to be a perfect person. I don't believe cleaning your room means that you're never going to have any problems ever again, that you're just going to be straight. But I think it means that when you get it sorted out, you know what you want. For example, here's the thing. If you take the metaphor literally, your room's going to get messed up again. And guess what? You're going to have to clean it up again. And it's just going to be a cycle of you clean up your room, you get it organized. So metaphorically, you know what you want. You go out and try to get it. In the pursuit of trying to get what you want, your room gets messy. You leave some things around. So in the metaphor, bad things happen, chaos occurs, problems arise. But then you clean up your room again. And it's a constant cycle. It means that in order to start fixing bigger problems, you have to gain the skills with smaller things before you can affect the bigger things. And I would argue that every example TJ is going to show us is more to Peterson's point than his own. TJ goes on to give us several examples in the forms of Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X as men who did not have their rooms clean, and yet through chaos were able to elicit massive changes in the social political systems they were trying to change. Again, I would argue the opposite. I would argue that these men were actually incredibly organized, and while their personal lives may not have been the best, as far as their goals and desires were pretty clearly defined, I would say. Now, I guess if you want to take the interpretation that Peterson means, that cleaning up your room means that you are a sorted out person and your life is in a good place, and that you shouldn't be trying to change the political system if your life is not, even still, I don't find TJ using the fact that Martin Luther King Jr. was a adulterer and was a plagiarist really kind of serves his point very well, because even if you tell me that some men who have not had their lives sorted out have gone on to do great things, it doesn't change the fact. It doesn't even change the basic principle or the basic wisdom that having the ability to solve simpler problems is going to help you figure out how to solve larger problems in the future. In fact, this is the entire educational system, by the way. This is mathematics. Your entire life going through school. You learn how to add, subtract. A couple of years later, you learn how to multiply and divide. A couple of years later, you add exponents. You add order of operations. The point is, in order to get to a point where you can start messing with exponents and start messing with the distributive property, you have to learn how to add and subtract, multiply, divide. That is Peterson's point. And for TJ to extrapolate this into some crazy notion that it's not possible to have your life straightened out and to go out and try to fix the world, or for him to say that some men have gone out to fix their world and their lives and they're not in order, does not change the fact that in order to solve something bigger, you have to have the skills to solve something smaller. And this is what Peterson is saying when he tells you to clean your room. Oh, but now TJ will address me directly. No, I'm kidding. What he actually says is this.
Now, but TJ, you're now saying you've missed the point of Peterson's statement, that a person who is opposed to the order of the day cannot work to change it. He was essentially saying that a person must have their own life in order before they attempt to start changing the world. Well, Martin Luther King Jr. may have been a great champion for civil rights, but he was also a plagiarist who was not at all faithful to his wife. The extent of his plagiarism and his infidelities is unknown, but few argue that they didn't happen. Imagine if Martin Luther King Jr. had said, well, I'm a flawed person. I've done some bad things. My life is not in perfect order, so how can I presume to lecture the world? How can I presume to change the world when I can't even change the bad things about myself? Imagine if he'd taken that tact. Maybe black people would still be drinking from the separate water fountains in places like my home state of Louisiana.
Or maybe we would have gotten the same result. Because unless his infidelity is what fueled his call for civil rights, and unless his lack of originality, so he needed to plagiarize, is what fueled his desire to have black people and white people be seen and treated as equals, then it is totally irrelevant to his primary goal and mission in life. And I would imagine that, well, at the very least, this is how I have always interpreted what Peterson has been saying about cleaning your room. You have to know what you want, and his infidelity and plagiarism are not really conducive to what he wants in life, and that is black and white people being treated as equals. Now, we're using Martin Luther King as an example, but the point is, well, actually, we'll get to the point. I'll let TJ continue.
But whether I agree with Malcolm X or not isn't the point. The point is that he didn't wait for his room to be clean before he spoke out against the injustices that he perceived in the world. And as his views changed, so did what he preached to his people. And so those who followed his journey changed with him. He didn't wait until his ducks were all in a row. He got them in a row as he went, as best he could. And more than half a century after his death, his name and his legacy remain. For better or for worse, and that once again is relative, he changed the world. He didn't need perfect order in his life to change the order of the world. He didn't need perfect knowledge of the systems he was affecting in order to change those systems. Many of those who changed the course of history not only used chaos as their tool, but had skeletons in their dirty rooms. Winston Churchill was a white supremacist prick who very few people actually liked. But he still led England through the darkest days of its history in World War II. John Lennon was an absentee father and wife-beater, but he still wrote great songs and generated an enormous groundswell of support for peace activism. Thomas Jefferson was not only a slave owner, but he was also fucking at least one of his slaves, Sally Hemings, and had numerous children by her. But he was still instrumental in laying down the foundational thoughts that defined what the United States of America would be as a country. Henry Ford was an anti-Semite who bought the Dearborn Independent newspaper just to propagate his hatred of the Jews. But he still revolutionized industrial manufacturing with his ingenious vision of the assembly line. Aristotle was brutally misogynistic and thought women were little more than deformed men. But he was still among the most brilliant and foundational philosophers of all time. Einstein was a philanderer. Benjamin Franklin was a womanizer. Christopher Columbus was an absolute fucking clueless dolt.
Now, perhaps it is now me who is splitting the hairs. Perhaps it is I who am taking advantage of clearly undefined terms and clearly undefined meanings from even Peterson's own mouth. And if I am, by all means, call me out on it. However, based on what Peterson said in the clip TJ provided, and based on Peterson in general, from what I've heard, I don't believe that Peterson expects for anyone to be a perfect bastion in their life. I believe that Peterson wants people to be introspective and at the very least try to have their ducks in a row before they tackle a monolith. This doesn't mean that every person who tries to change something is going to have their life right. I think it would be silly to expect that, especially if you're a Christian. You know, man is in a fallen state of sin. The point is, it is better to have it than not to have it. Because for every one Martin Luther King who goes out and does a great thing, for every John Lennon who is a as you say, a deadbeat father, and abusive husband. For every one of those, you have millions of these men in a very chaotic environment who have destroyed their families. For every cheating man like this, again, who has destroyed the trust of the women in their life, they have brought forth this chaos, and they bring forth nothing good in this world. And if they fix their life, they might be able to have a family and go on to do something good. That's the point. It's silly to say that because some men who have had terrible personal lives have gone on to do great things, that one person, one individual should not focus on trying to reinvent themselves and becoming a better person. At least this is what is being implied here. If this is not what's being implied here, then by all means correct me on it. But it seems that TJ is implying that you should not, or that you cannot, try to get yourself straightened out if you wish to go on to change the world. Now, this is some tried and true silliness, at least to me, because I don't understand why TJ believes that trying to sort yourself out is a process that apparently would have to take ages. Sorting yourself out, I would imagine, is a process that could take a year if you stopped and you thought about yourself critically for an hour a day. If you sought out an hour a day in 24 hours, probably before you go to sleep, you literally have an hour where you sit in your room and you meditate and you try to figure out what's going on in your life and find a plan. There has to be some point in time where you get to relax, where you just kind of get to sit around and be. And I think in that time you can use to try to sort yourself out and figure out what you want in life. I think TJ is implying that the world moves too fast for you as a person to try to understand who you are and what you want. And I don't think the world moves that fast. Life is the longest thing that you do. And even if you take an entire year to try to figure out who you are and what you want, a process I don't even think should take a year, but let's just say it does. Even if it takes a decade, the world would not have changed so radically in the decade to where all of your work means nothing. Because now that you know who you are and where you stand, you can now use the skills that you've spent a decade building to propel you forward. And again, that is the point that Peterson is making. This is straight up what Peterson said. Before you try to go tackle a bigger problem, you have to have the skills in order to fix a smaller problem that is immediately in front of you. I think another thing to note is, again, these men are in the minority, because when you find like John Lennon, for example, if you find someone who is neglectful and abusive, while it might be true that he might have made good music, which I don't really think he did, but whatever. Well, it might be true that he did that for, in some people's opinion. The truth of the matter is, most men will not be able to do this if they are of the same character. They will destroy people's lives. It would be totally negative. It would absolutely be detrimental to the people around them if they are neglectful and abusive to their wives or the mother of their children. He's an exception. And I wouldn't even say he's an exception, because I don't imagine that his children turned out very well. He may have made great music. He may have etched his name in history. But as far as producing good fruits in his life, he didn't do that. And I would honestly think that Peterson would probably say he should have focused more on that than his music career. Most people probably won't agree to that, but I mean, I don't give a fuck. I don't care.
This could go on ad nauseum. When you study the lives of influential people who changed the course of history in some way, big or small, good or bad, finding someone with their shit together is a lot harder than you'd think. Jordan Peterson's directive to see to it that you have mastery over yourself before you attempt to change the world is not an antidote to chaos at all, but a paralytic agent that places you at the mercy of chaos. Because while you're trying to master yourself and clean your room, the world does not sit idly by and wait for you to find your bearings. It churns and morphs and fights and yields to the forces that act upon it. You haven't the time to wait until you're the master of yourself before you fight to change the world.
Again, TJ doesn't say, but he has to at the very least be implying or hoping that we as an audience assume that the process of sorting yourself out has to take some prolonged period of time. But I don't think that it does. I don't think that it should. Figuring out what you want, I don't really think, I think it's a process that you can get over in a couple of months if you put some effort into it. And I don't think the world changes so radically in a couple of months. So I just flat out disagree with him. I'm sure there's a lot of time for you to figure it out. In fact, I think you need to figure it out before you go. In fact, again, I think TJ is wrong here. I think all of these men figured out exactly what they wanted in life and sought out to obtain it, despite the fact that they were terrible people.
If you take that tact, you will die, still in pursuit of your own perfection, and the world will not blink at your passage because you left no mark. You cannot always play defense. You cannot focus all of your energy on fortification of yourself and none of your energy on attacking that which you find unjust or incompetent. The truth as I see it is this: no one's room is actually clean. No one truly has an antidote for chaos, and hopefully by now you've realized that's a good thing. Chaos is not your enemy. It is your friend. Even when it hurts you, it is often reshaping your world in ways that history will ultimately deem were for the better.
Here's something I want people to ponder for a second. Has anyone ever played a video game before? Specifically, a video game that requires boss battles. So RPGs, side-scrollers, platformers usually. You'll notice something very interesting about a lot of these games in their format. Mega Man, for example. I think Mega Man's a great example of this. In a Mega Man game, and all of them, actually, all the Mega Man games I've played, there's usually a door or a room before you get into the boss fight. This sounds like a tangent, but it's important. Where you enter the room and you have to walk down the hallway before you get to the boss. Now, I always interpreted the point of this room is give you a second to strategize or to wonder what is about to happen. In other words, it's to sort yourself out. The point that I'm making is that even in video games, you have a chance to take a break and breathe in what is going on before you proceed. And considering that life is a lot longer than a 15, 30, 45-hour video game, I'm sure there's always going to be some time where you can sit down and reevaluate what's going on before you go face off against some dragon. And I think Peterson here is saying when you need to clean your room, is you need to take a break and take a breather before you go off and face something huge. I think another way to interpret this is this. Let's say you're a warrior. Let's forget clean your room. Let's say you're a fighter in some medieval fantasy world. And you have a quest to go face a Hydra. You want to fight this gigantic creature with 7 heads that grow back whenever you cut it. But you're afraid of a mouse. You can't even get a mouse out of your friend's basement. How are you going to face this Hydra, this behemoth of a monster, if you can't deal with a rat, with a mouse? This is what Peterson is saying. And I believe that all of these men all had the skills and they had the abilities to deal with these tougher issues in life, despite the fact that some of them all had their personal flaws and weaknesses. I don't think Peterson would disagree with you at all here. I think what Peterson would say is that, these men had the skills they needed to succeed in life. Now, personally, could they have been better? Certainly. However, they still were cleaning up their room. Your room's always going to get dirty again. You're always going to have to clean it up again if you keep the metaphor literally or if you keep it to its logical conclusion. But the point is, if you have the skills and you have the organization, if you have the structure, you're going to do a lot of things right more often than you're going to get them wrong. I think we can end the second video right here. I think the major problem, TJ ends the video with the beginning. Well, this actually isn't the ending of his video, but I'm ending it here. He continues to over-complexify what Peterson purposefully simplified. Peterson's book is for the individual who is dealing with individual problems and struggling with them and needs some order and some rules that help them get on the right path and figure out who they are and what they want. TJ is talking about the grander philosophical understanding of the relationship between order and chaos. And he's not wrong in saying that good things can sprout from chaos. However, he is wrong in trying to change the perception that we have of chaos. The truth of the matter is, chaos is normally a very bad thing. Even in his example that he brought up about biology, usually most genes do not mutate beneficially. It's usually a mutation is bad. Getting fired from your job can lead you to finding a job you want, but usually it's bad. Now, Peterson's not saying that you need to be a perfect person. Peterson's not saying that you have to know everything and understand everything. He's saying you have to know who you are, and you have to have the ability to solve smaller problems before you can go on to face bigger, larger problems. And that doesn't mean that every single man throughout history has to be like that. As TJ's proven, that's not the case. However, it's better to be this way than to not be this way. I don't really think that TJ's brought forth a counter argument against this. So there we go. That is the end of the second video. I certainly hope that you guys enjoyed it. I'm actually, I think I might enjoy the rest of what TJ has to say. If he keeps misrepresenting Peterson or arguing with what seems to be his imagination, I think that this video series will prove to be very entertaining for the people who want to sit by and listen. So with that being said, I certainly hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and if you did, man, go ahead and click the like button, and shoot, go ahead and click that subscribe button. Comment in the comment box below, and as always, you guys have yourselves a great day. I will see you cool cats soon. Adios.